Hey, Lee Merriweather here. You know, the lawyer decided to become a sawyer. I wanted to take a minute just to talk about knots in wood and different milling techniques when you encounter knots. Now, or what you can do. Now, most of these logs were nice and clean. When I say clean, that means they didn't have knots in them. So when you look at this just came out of the kiln. This is Willow Oak. It came out, you notice there's very few knots. Well, these boards actually don't have any knots in them except for right there. But even with that, it's still nice and flat. I mean, in fact, look at the whole stack. You're going to see the stack is nice and flat. It came out fantastic. We couldn't be any happier with the result. Now, compare that to this board over here. Now, this board came from a different log. Then it was the same tree, but a different part of the tree. This one had some tree branches growing out of it. Not all of them, but you know, you'll notice this first part. It is nice and straight. It's flat. It sits on the forks funny, but it is nice and straight and flat. I don't know how well it shows up in the video right there, but hopefully you can see it. However, there is a twist in it, like it's sitting funny, but the twist isn't because of anything that was done wrong on the sawmill or wrong in the kiln. So it was actually because of these knots. So you can see it right here. This right here, I don't know how well you can see that twist here, but this is actually twisting right here. And there's a spot right here, and you can see it's thinner right there. So when this came off the kiln, off the mill, it was flat. See that right there, that deviation right there? And maybe you can get a good idea here. I don't know how well it shows up on camera, but you get the idea. You can really see it right here, how it does this. Now this went into the kiln flat, but because the wood, the grain is moving in different directions from this tree branch that was coming out, it was going in all kinds of different directions. This dries at different rates and creates tension in the board, and as a result, the board is not straight. From there on, nice and flat, but then we get to where the knots are, not so much. Now, we were milling this wood up for a specific purpose, so we kept it all the same, and there weren't that many knots. So for what the customer's going to do, odds are they will cut this part off. They'll cut it off there because the rest of the wood is nice and flat. Now, when I encounter logs with a lot of knots in them, though, I recommend to the customer cutting it much thicker. So if they were looking for a finished thickness of like 1.5 inches, I would say at least 2 inches, maybe 2 1/4, because this is an example of it twisting it just a little bit from 2 knots right here. If you had a lot of knots in the board, well, you're going to get a lot of twisting all the way through, and it's still pretty, don't get me wrong, but you have to give yourself enough material in order to take into account the twisting and the warping where the knots are. So that's my 2 cents on how to deal with knotty wood. Just mill it a little bit thicker to account for the wood movement that you're going to get when you put it in the kiln or pull it out of the kiln. But otherwise, all this wood came out absolutely fantastic. Again, even with the few knots we had, we can't be any happier with the results. Thanks so much for watching.